A while back in one of my previous videos, I said that the Sentinel Peter B. Parker was the most posable 6-inch Spider-Man figure, but that actually wasn't true. I failed to remember that Revoltech Amazing Yamaguchi had released a Spider-Man that is far more posable than that figure. Although it's more posable than the Sentinel Spider-Man, the aesthetic of that figure was totally off. In my opinion, the figure looked lumpy and I wasn't a fan of the style. Plus, all of the extra articulation broke up the sculpt all over, ruining its cohesiveness, which in turn stunts the suspension of disbelief that allows you to view a figure as that character as opposed to a piece of plastic. So why am I telling you this? Well, Amazing Yamaguchi has gone ahead and released a 2.0 version that might have just fixed all of those previous issues. And this time you can bet on the fact that yes, this is far more posable than any other 6-inch Spider-Man figure that has ever been produced up until this point in time. So without further ado, welcome back to Riley's Collection. I'm Riley, and today I'm going to be breaking down everything you need to know about the Revoltech Amazing Yamaguchi Spider-Man 2.0 and why I think it is effectively the ultimate Spider-Man action figure in 2023. If you have a keen eye, the first thing you'll notice about this Spider-Man is that the design they went for here isn't quite the classic red and blue spandex we all know and love. Instead, Revoltech has gone for the all-new, all-different Spider-Man design, also known as the Spider Armor Mark III. This costume boasts an all-metallic design featuring royal blue and hot rod red that is executed stunningly on this figure, and I do love me a metallic Spider-Man. The logos on the front and back are unique to this version of Spider-Man, but don't stray too far from the more traditional designs we've seen in the past. In the comics this suit design originated from, you can see a green glow emanating from the eyes and chest logo that seems to be mostly absent here. And I say mostly because I think there may be a slight green tint to the white paint they use for the eyes and the chest logo, but if there is, it's too faint to be able to tell. Some of you guys might be disappointed by that because that is a really distinctive feature of this costume, but personally I prefer the subtlety because it means this guy can very easily pass for your standard Spider-Man. Plus, a lot of the accessories that we'll talk about later are green, so that will help complete that accurate comic design if you care about that. Furthermore, choosing to not emphasize the green on the figure itself gives us collectors more options. If you already have the previous Revoltech Spidey, you still might want this one because you want the all-new, all-different design, but on the flip side, if you wanted a classic Spidey from Revoltech, this figure works excellently for that as well. One pretty noticeable deviation from that classic suit here though is the boot design. The boots angle upwards instead of just cutting off at the calf, which is something that might bother some people about this design. You also might have noticed the web lines are also slightly different than the classic design, opting for mostly straight lines with any curvature being very subtle or entirely absent. This is most noticeable on the chest, neck, and abdomen, where the web lines make V shapes all the way down the body. The web lines are also sculpted into the body as opposed to being raised or painted on, which we don't see too often. The crevices of those lines are filled in with a black paint which looks pretty clean throughout the entire figure. And just when you thought this figure couldn't get any more beautiful, you'll notice the sculpted in honeycomb patterns all over the blue sections, giving more depth to those sections, which is particularly effective while paired with this very reflective blue paint. It really makes the figure shimmer in the best way possible. The proportions of this figure look spot on. Nothing looks too long, too short, too big or too small. As you can see here, Spider-Man is sporting an ultra muscular build this time around, and I'm absolutely here for it. In my personal opinion, an adult Spider-Man should be built, and that's exactly what we get here. The big shoulders and harshly tapered torso section make this figure look particularly super heroic. Marvel Legends, take notes. On top of that, every inch of the sculpt is covered in sculpted musculature. I don't know who sculpted this figure, but they did an absolutely stellar job bringing this figure to life. I'm honestly so blown away by how this figure looks. When I compare it to my other Spidey imports, it makes them look dinky, and and that's saying quite a lot because those are fantastic releases. In my opinion, Mafex 185, Sentinel Peter B. Parker, and even the SH Figuarts Toby figure don't hold a candle to this guy in terms of presentation. It just goes to show how much effort was put into that presentation, and I really appreciate that. As far as the joints and breakage of sculpt, it's pretty minimal here, all things considered. The ball joints on the shoulders and external butterfly joints can be noticeable and off-putting for some, but I think they did an incredible job balancing the articulation against the overall look. It has no problem getting into a neutral stance, which is something that Revoltech has struggled with in the past. It does a pretty good job keeping the sculpt looking sharp and clean throughout. Now it's time to talk about all the wonderful goodies this guy comes packed in with. Let's start with more of the standard accessories of the set. This figure comes with a total of 6 sets of hands, including fists, thwippers, flat wall crawling hands, another set of open hands more suited for crouching poses and things of that nature, reaching/grabbing hands, and relaxed hands. Right about now you might be asking yourself, what about grabbing hands? Which is exactly what I said when I started playing with this figure, but I have recently come to find out that the fists actually have a port on them so you can plug in your web line and they double as your web holding hands and also your fists. And honestly, I think that's a pretty genius move. Saves plastic without really sacrificing any utility. Also, all of the ports Revoltech has put onto this figure are all exactly the same size except the peg for the flight stand. So any accessory can potentially plug in anywhere that has a port, which makes this figure somewhat modular. I could plug a web line into his back if I really wanted to. Speaking of web lines, you get 2 of them in this set, and they're done in this really cool translucent green plastic to emulate that green glow I was talking about earlier. Both lines are exactly the same. They have 1 peg at the end that can plug in again to any port of the figure, so it can plug into the thwippers, the fists, or even either side of his back if you really wanted to. The web lines are made of a rigid hard plastic, but still have some flex to them and don't feel overly fragile or easily breakable. So that's more of the standard end of things, but we also get 4 sets of interchangeable eyes, including your standard eyes, squinted eyes, surprised eyes, and happy/silly squinted eyes, and all of the eye plates can be mixed and matched to create some really unique looks for Spider-Man here. You can really achieve a wide range of facial expressions here with this Spider-Man, which is really cool because Spider-Man is such an expressive character. We've seen this kind of thing before with SH Figuarts Spider-Man of the past, but Revoltech's offering here is the total eye plate package, giving you every type of eye you'd ever need or want for Spider-Man basically. The one thing I will say though about the eyes is that sometimes they like to fall out when you're playing with them. It's not too often or really that big of a deal in my opinion, but it's definitely something to be aware of. We also get 2 sets of web wings. You get your open web wings, also done in that green plastic, and they look really nice. They plug in very well to the figure. You shouldn't have any issues getting the wings to stay on, although it can be a little tricky plugging them in at first, at least the first few times, so be careful for sure. They're definitely not a perfect look, but if you can get everything lined up well, you can definitely get some pretty striking poses with them. You also get, I guess, like your more inactive wings, or just wings in a different position. They also plug in really well. I haven't had any issues getting them to stay on, but these web wings also double as webbing for your thwipping hands, which is very, very cool. Like I said, all the ports are completely modular, so you've got a lot of options here. Rounding out the accessories, we have an included flight stand that can plug into the figure's back. Also included is a clamp attachment for the stand, so that's another option you have. Additionally, the base of the stand has ports all over it so you can adjust where you want the stand arm to be positioned. This stand works very well and is probably the best flight stand I've ever received with a figure. As an added bonus, it also comes with a magnet attachment you can use as your base so that you can hang Spider-Man off your fridge, so that's pretty cool too. The big omission here though is obviously an unmasked head. That really would have been the cherry on top, so it's kind of a bummer that we don't get one. Other than that though, I think this accessory lineup is pretty stellar. There's really nothing else missing or that I felt he still needed. It's the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's talk about the articulation. Starting with the head, using that ball joint he can look up all the way, although not too much going down, but when you combine it with the neck joint, he can almost touch his chin to his chest. Using both of those ball joints, you can achieve some pretty nice tilt from side to side. The patented Revoltech external butterfly joints provide excellent range of motion for those shoulders back and forth. Also, the shoulders are really interesting here. The shoulder itself is connected to a ball joint that connects to another ball joint joint with a disc hinge pegged into the chest. It can swivel on the peg connected inside the chest all the way forward and backward, and the ball hinge allows him to raise his arms high above his head. The ball joint inside the shoulder is really just for angling the shoulders, giving you a full rotation and slight up and down movement. So the shoulder setup is pretty comprehensive, to say the least. With joints like these, you'll have no problem getting Spider-Man to completely cross his arms in the front or the back. At the bicep, you get a full rotation. The elbows are set up pretty much exactly the same as the shoulders, peg, ball hinge, ball joint, and works just as well. Wrists are on standard ball hinges, giving you forwards, backwards, and full rotation. Utilizing this articulation setup, Spider-Man can have his arms completely folded in front of him, which is basically unheard of in this hobby. Moving down to the diaphragm, it's on a ball joint that gets you very excellent range forward and a solid amount backwards. The tilt from side to side on this joint is incredible. Using just this joint, you can bring his hand all the way down to his calf. The waist, like almost everything else, is also on a ball joint, and it really helps extend the range he can crunch in and arch back. There's this little floating piece between the abdomen and the crotch area that can be pretty tricky to orient properly. If need be though, it is on a ball joint, so you can easily pop it apart and adjust. The waist joint on mine did get a little floppy after some use, but it can still stand up and it holds a pose just fine, so it's a minor issue. You can rotate both the diaphragm joint and the waist joint 360 degrees. Moving on to the legs, he can do a perfect split and he can lift his leg up well above 90 degrees. Basically no movement backwards, however, due to the sculpt. The thigh cut allows for full rotation. The single jointed knee provides an excellent range inward, and there's even a sculpted divot in the back of the thigh to help that out a little bit. Another really interesting choice they've made here is giving him a calf cut and then putting it on a hinge. I know, it's bonkers. The other end is connected via ball joint. Using this setup all together gets you maximum range, despite some minor gappiness. And finally, the foot is on a ball hinge that moves all the way down, decent range upward, and the toes bend all the way up. So overall, the articulation on this guy is nothing short of mind-blowing. Depending on who you are, it might be a bit of a frustration to get everything sorted the way you want it. There are a lot of moving parts that you really need to take the time to understand in order to maximize your enjoyment of this figure. However, I feel that the barrier to entry in this regard is rather overstated by many members of the figure collecting community, as most of the articulation is just ball joints and hinges, just like any other ones we've seen before. The joints themselves feel great to handle, no stiffness on any joints, and only slight loosening in the waist, which again I don't think is a huge issue at all, and definitely not a huge issue for me. So y'all already know what the verdict is going to be for this figure in my opinion, but is it worth the buy for you? Well, in short, yes. If you're looking for the most posable Spider-Man action figure in this scale, this is it. If you want a more modern Spidey with top-notch paint and detail, this is it. If you want a Spider-Man that comes with every accessory you could ever want aside from that unmasked head, you get the idea. Honestly, I could go on and on about how good I think this figure is, but is it good for the price? This guy retails for about $100, give or take, which is pretty standard import pricing at this point, but that's definitely still a ton of money to shell out on yet another Spider-Man action figure. Personally, I think it was worth every single cent. I started playing with this figure, and for the first time in a long while, I actually felt like I got my money's worth. Yes, there have been other imports I really liked for a similar price, but that steep price point always made it feel like a loss to some degree, especially when certain companies like SHF are now starting to omit accessories like fisted hands from their newer releases. With this guy, I didn't really feel like I took a loss, I just had a ton of fun, and that's really what it's all about. So with all that being said, I give this figure my full recommendation to you guys. If you want him, get him. I'm sure he'll be going up in price after he's out of production. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I worked really hard on it, so please smash that like button if you did. To my subscribers that have been patiently waiting for the last 4 weeks for me to finally upload, I want to thank you for your continued support, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long. I hope it was worth the wait. If you aren't subscribed already, hit that subscribe button, because subscribing to this channel gives you lifetime virtual access to my collection. And I don't know about you, but that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Alright guys, have a fantastic day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.